Good evening and welcome to the budget workshop for the Eden Central School District. We're going to start out, we're going to talk about how we're balancing our expenditures with our revenues. So we're talking about at first some overall staffing increase. We will be having increases for our universal pre-K, which when I'm finished with the slide, the superintendent's going to talk in a little more depth about. And that will be 1.5 full-time equivalent teaching, 1.5 FTE teacher's aide, 0.6 FTE for physical education for the students. Then in our academic instructional services, due to the pandemic, we find that a greater need for students to have supports. So our GLP will have a 0.5 FTE and our Eden Elementary a 0.5. Special education has asked for an increase of 0.5 FTE for teaching and 2 teachers' aides. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sortisio.
Thank you, Mrs. Feldman. When we reflect on this current slide, each of these additional positions is really designed to provide additional support for our students, particularly our youngest students, our pre-K students, and some of our neediest students. So the idea behind expanding our UPK program to full day is that a full day program is really the best model to prepare students for kindergarten. And if we have the building blocks in the right places and the right supports when children are first entering school, they predictably will have a better and more successful time as they move on through the grade levels. Some of the additional positions like the 0.6 physical education position and some of the AIS are really byproducts of changing the UPK program from a half-day model to a full-day model. So those positions are currently occupied in some way, shape, or form, but need to be expanded in order to meet all the needs of the students in those programs and the other programs that those teachers serve. Of course, increasing our AIS, academic instructional services, makes an awful lot of sense, particularly as students come back from multiple years of different schooling, if you will. And we found that particularly at our younger ages, the primary building and the elementary building, it makes the most sense to provide those additional supports, particularly in the areas of reading and mathematics.
Thank you. So we're going to start with our budgetary assumptions. So our revenue assumptions for this presentation, the levy increase is proposed at 2.13%, or $323,533. That increase will be set later on in the budget process by the Board of Education. So there's nothing in stone at this point. Our budget to budget revenues are going up $929,294. Our overall expenditures are slated to increase 4.05%, or $1.3 million. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the savings we've come up with. School library informational technology is the line item. This savings is coming from the informational technology department. We're going to be saving $39,914 year to year budgetarily. And our debt service, which as we've talked many times, is our mortgage payment, is going down $420,930, as is the state aid that helps pay for that. So we're going to analyze the expenditure increases. The Board of Education is going up $1,268, or 8.16%. I want to remind everyone yet again, our board members do not receive a salary for any of the work they do. They are strictly volunteers to the community. Central administration, that is everything from the superintendent's office, the finance office, buildings and grounds, the infrastructure from BOCES for our computer system and BOCES administrative costs. That's going up $285,000 or 7.5%. Administration and improvements, that is professional development, curriculum, and the building offices in each of the buildings. That's going up $187,931 or 17.72%. Here's another one of those anomalies we talked about last time. General education is going up $239,008 or 2.78%. Well, the percentage, because it's on a bigger number, is much less than the $187,000 or the $285,000 in the previous two lines. Programs for students with disabilities is going up $219,559 or 5.2%. And I want to remind everyone that any students that are excessive in cost, we will receive the following year additional state aid called excess cost aid to help the district pay for those students' extraordinary needs. Our occupational education, which is our career and tech over at BOCES and our P-Tech, it's going up $67,000 or 7.9%. As other areas, this is an expenditure-driven aid. So next year, if our costs go up to that amount, to the budgetary amount, then we will receive additional BOCES aid from New York State. Our community education is going up $720 or 2.09%. So we're going to talk about pupil services, which is everything from the guidance office and the nurses to the athletic department. It's going up $116,000 or 6.8% budget to budget. Pupil transportation is going up $106,595 or 5.82. Inclusive in that number, budget to budget, is an increase for the fuel that we're all experiencing in our personal lives. And since we did not expend all the extra we put into that budget last year, as we didn't know with the pandemic what our transportation costs were going to be, we were able to lessen the severity to the budget. Our civic activities, which is predominantly the fitness center and any building use, that's going up 5.44% or $1,600. Employee benefits, which is Social Security that all employers are required to pay, medical insurance for our employees, workers' compensation, which all employers are required to pay, unemployment, we have to budget in case there is a layoff, and it also includes the retirement systems. That's going up 8.01% or $556,000. So our total expenditure increases, just the total increases is 1.7 million. Less the reductions we talked about on the previous screen, gives us total expenditure increases of $1,322,234. Now we're going to look at the revenue analysis because we are mandated to make sure our revenues equal our expenditures. So school taxes, which will be determined by the Board of Education, are being presented at 2.13% increase. State aid is going up 6.01%, and that is predominantly due to an increase in the 21-22 school year expenditure-driven aid. Federal aid increases, which is our Medicaid, is going up 150%. And our miscellaneous, which is predominantly driven by our local share of the state sales tax, is going up 16.75%. Now, appropriated fund balance is the money you have left over from year to year that can be used in the following year by a Board of Education. It should be used judiciously, and not every year should it be increased to cover property taxes. Because we are seeing such good increases in our state and federal and miscellaneous aids, I'm recommending a 19.52 decrease to this so we may save our rainy day fund for a true rainy day. Reserves to be determined by the Board of Education, they're being presented at 16.88% decrease. There is an employee benefit liability reserve. It's nicknamed EBLAR, and we cannot use it unless we have known retirements. Our retirements are due to the superintendent by January 31st, and this year we have received no notification of retirements. So I'm unable to utilize those funds. The only way I can touch those funds is to have actual expenditures, or if it were overfunded, to apply to the New York State Comptroller for release of funds. Currently, Eden Central School is not overfunded in their EBLAR. So now we're going to talk about very high level, because I've been very detail oriented in all the past presentations. So I think it's time we move to a higher level. General support, which is everything, all the infrastructure that happens behind the scenes and not in the classrooms. That's going up $287,000. Instructional is going up $790,000. That's where we want to see our money. That's where our students are. Pupil transportation, we talked about, it's going up $106,000. Our employee benefits, debt service, civic activities, and something that's an accounting term called interfund transfers are going up $137,000. Our total expenditures, once again, will be going up $1,322,234. Year-to-year revenues at a 2.13 property tax increase, tax levy would go up $323,000. Our state aid, because of those expenditure-driven aids that we utilized in this school year, is going up $779,000. Our federal aid is going up $45,000, and our miscellaneous, where we spoke was due to sales tax predominantly, is going up $293,000. The percentages for the appropriated fund balance reduction is $402,000, and the reserves are going down $109,000. So our change budget to budget of revenues is $929,294. So our budget gap at this point with a 2.13% increase, with no increase in state aid, with no additional funds coming anywhere, would be $392,940. So where do we go from here? We have to plan and we have to be ready for the next step in the budget process. So do we look at taxes versus reserves? Those are two very real items that are in the board's discretion for use. So our property tax cap, if we were to go, it's all new money, the second column, 1% of the levy would equal $151,648. A 2% levy increase for the entire district would be $303,296. And a 2.13, which is presented in this presentation, is $323,533 to levy against the $1.3 million increase in our expenditures. So every year we do a property tax cap calculation, and this year's maximum allowable levy limit, which means it allows us not to only tax as much, but it sets that it would require voter authorization of a simple majority of 50% plus one. So 2.13% increase would be $323,533 divided amongst all the tax-paying properties in the Eden Central School District. So now a little history. This is our 10-year true value. What is true value? True value is the total assessment for the district, including any increases that occur from new builds, times an equalization rate per town. That equalization rate is determined by New York State. It is not determined locally, neither is the assessment. So in 2012-13, the average tax rate for the district for every $1,000 of assessment was $19.01. And now if we look forward to last year, 21-22, it was $16.16, a decrease over that time span. And I want to remind everyone, the 21-22 levy amount, the total taxes that we asked taxpayers to pay was the exact same dollars as a 2021 levy, and yet the rate changed. So what would the potential tax increase be based on the three assumptions we saw previous? A 1% increase to bring in $151,648 would come out to be $17 per 100,000 of assessment. 2%, which would drive $303,296, would be $33. 2.13% would be $35 per the year. The one thing that I want to remind you of, this will not be your exact tax bill because we have no way of knowing what the equalization rates or the assessments will be for the community. So the impact of the potential levy increases on the voter required authorization, because that's what the property tax cap is. It doesn't say you can't raise more money than the maximum allowable limit. It just determines how much of a majority you need to pass a vote. So at 1%, you need 50% plus one. At 2%, 50% plus one. And 2.13% of 50% plus one. The reason that I did not show anything higher than a simple majority was because when I submitted in March to the state controller, the Board of Education directed me at that time, they were not looking to be higher than the maximum allowable levy limit. If that should change, then the voting requirements might change. But again, I want to remind everyone, the tax cap formula simply says how much voter authority we need in order to pass a budget. So closing the big gap, reserves and levy combinations. So these reserves are available and can be utilized to reduce the budget shortfall. We have workers' comp, and you see that it would go from $347,497 in all the scenarios, $218,123, because that's the only expense I have, and I'm not asking the board to unfund it. Unemployment is at $240,798, and I'm asking the board if we could unfund it in the budget when they adopt a budget, which would bring that down to $134,610 in all three scenarios. Employee retirement contribution. That has a lot of money in it because it was established long ago, which is why that is the one, if we were to go for a 2.13, a 2.0, or a 1.0, you'll see the number has gone down of what I would have left at the end of 22-23 because we would utilize more of it. The teacher's retirement contribution is a fairly recent reserve and is a maximum of what can be funded in each year. So that has $399,681, but I would only ask to reduce it to $197,312. Again, we have to remember, every time we use a reserve and we spend it, we are relying on living on our savings account. The liability reserve, we have left untouched in this proposal because we do not know if there would be a liability that could come in the future. So we're leaving that static at $546,307 for year-end 22-23. The tax certiorari, which I have a hard time saying, is the claim that someone can say, my tax bill is too high and I'm going to go through and I'm going to hire a lawyer to try to get my assessment lowered. Right now, between interest and known claims, we have $42,805 of liability. So we can only use that if we're actually paying out a claim. The employee benefit, that's the one I talked about, that we can only utilize for expenditures that are actually to be incurred, and with no retirements this year, that will stay at $1,109,676, which is less than our liability that we carry on our books. Our repair reserve, since that's for unknown repairs, will stay static at $313,886. So what we're really saying is, we think at the end of 21-22, we'll have $5.3 million in these reserves that can be used for offsetting the budget. At a 2.13 levy increase, there would be $4.8 million left. if the board chose to use reserves to help close the gap between the different levies that were presented. So a 2% would take it from 5.3 down to 4.7. And a 1% would take it from 5.3 down to 4.6 million. Voter authorized reserves. These are other reserves. They're for Proposition 2 and 3 and cannot be spent without voter authorization. So we have capital reserve for buses and equipment. That in all these scenarios would go from 1.2 million down to 570,000 as we purchase new buses and equipment for buildings and grounds in the transportation department. Capital technology, again, a fairly new reserve, would go from 667,000 down to 317,000. Our capital building, that's how we vote. When we say we have reserves, we can pledge. When we do a separate vote for capital reserve, we can't touch that without having a new capital project being voted on, which we do not have this year. So that will stay static at 725,000. So all of our voter reserves will go from 2.6 million down to 1.6 million if everything is authorized and there is nothing left to put back into these reserves. So our total reserves, the reserve total from the prior screen and this one goes from 7.9 million and a 2.13 levy down to 6.4 million, down another 20,000 approximately at a 2% levy to 6.4 million, or at a 1% levy increase down to 6.2 million. So the Board of Education has some decisions to make for the April 20th budget adoption. Our assumption and hope is that April 1st, New York State will adopt their state budget and our state aid will be finalized. Then the board has to decide whether to do reduce expenditures. If so, how much? How to increase revenues, increase property school taxes? If so, how much? Utilize more reserves? If so, how much? Or a combination of all the above? And this is our remaining schedule. I like to end with it every time. April 1st, the district is hoping to receive finalized state aid factors. April 20th is the tentative budget adoption. April 22nd is when the budget, I have to report to New York State the decision the Board of Education made and what will be on the referendum for May 18th. May 3rd will be a budget hearing where we'll go into detail of what's been going on in the district for the past year and what the finances are looking at with the final budget adoption. And then on May 18th, we would ask that everyone come to the middle school, high school auditorium entrance from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and vote. Thank you.